Welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be going over how much time and money you're going to need to invest in order to build your own motorcycle from scratch. Starting off, I started building my bike in March of 2024 and it was completely finished by May 2024 as well. So about 2 full months of working periodically, I built a full motorcycle, completely street legal, start to finish. Now, starting off, you guys are going to want to get a donor bike, same as in the last video where I did a price breakdown on both of my buggies and how much those cost. We're going to start off strong. You're going to look on Marketplace for your motorcycle. Definitely do a donor bike. Don't look on eBay for motors. Just buy a whole bike from scratch. So I found a wrecked Yamaha R3 for $800 on Facebook Marketplace, and at the time he couldn't confirm that it ran, but he did say the engine was good, so I was willing to take that risk strictly because that's the engine that I wanted for this build. So I went, picked this bike up, brought it home, and literally that night had it running again. The only thing that was wrong with it was the gauge cluster with all the wires were stripped and messed up, and the housings for the lights, start button, kill switch, everything like that was all tore up. But if you can follow a simple wire diagram, you can figure out where everything goes and what they do. And strictly after doing that, putting some different gas in it, putting the tank back on, she fired right up. It was a little rough because she hadn't ran in a few years or something like that, but it still ran, which was the very important part. So after that, I started the disassembling process. I took that entire bike apart one of the next days after that and started mocking everything up. At this point, I already had my control arm built because I knew what I was wanting to do, and I had already had built the control arm for it. So we started mocking everything up, putting the triple tree, the forks, and the front tire, and sandwiching that in the rear tire between some 2x4s that were bolted together, so I knew everything was perfectly true and straight in line with each other. Now, after doing that, we put the engine on a few blocks and started measuring out the distances from the front tire, distance to the rear tire, where the control arm was going to line up behind the engine, mounting to the frame. Then is when we started doing the process of the frame. We started off with the very front 2 motor mounts coming directly down from the triple tree. And after that, we had the front end and the motor kind of locked into place where we wanted it. Now after that, my gas tank had finally come in the mail, so I could start designing how I wanted the frame to wrap around the gas tank relative to the engine where everything was. And once I had those 2 main pieces of frame done, I could start working on where I was going to connect my control arm to the frame. And after that, we put the seat on, got it mocked up, and started bending that area around the seat. And that was one of the hardest things I ever learned how to bend. Bending tube in 3 different directions in one piece is very hard, but it turned out great. I was actually very surprised with how that turned out, and I love it. It turned out really good. But moving on from all of that, once the frame was completely finished and we got everything running, put the wiring back together and everything worked correctly, we'll start off by saying what kind of tubing I used. Similar to the last buggy video that I did and how much that cost, I used the same material for this bike that I did for that buggy. We used 1.125" by 0.120 wall DOM tubing, and we're going to need roughly about 30 feet of that just to play it safe, because I can't remember exactly how much it took, but I think it was just a little bit over a full bar, so a little bit over 20 foot, but we're going to play it safe and say we used about 30 feet. And that's going to cost you $168 before tax if your company prices it like where I work. Now, after that, you're going to need a headlight. The headlight that I used, I got off Amazon, and that was about $85. I love that headlight. It has a X in the center of it as the daytime running light, and it looks really good. You turn the key on and the X is glowing. You start the bike and the actual headlight turns on. It has high beam, low beam. The only difference is crotch rocket motorcycles headlights. They have 2 headlights on either side, and they are wired a little bit differently than cruiser bikes, which is kind of what these headlights were made for. They have a daytime running light, they have the high beam, low beam, and the negative, all in one connect kind of, and that's a little bit different than the cruiser bike or than the crotch rocket. So you will have to do some wiring to figure out what you can put where in order for it to work correctly, but it's really not that hard if you have a pretty basic understanding of electronics and how wiring works. After that, we got turn signals. The turn signals I used for this thing, I really love. I used for another build in the past, my GS 450. I put the same turn signals on that, and I love them. The 2 turn signals on the front, and then the rear has turn signals and tail lights and brake lights all together. And they're actually pretty cheap. The turn signals are only $40 for all of that. You get a lot for what those are. They're real small, but they are very bright LEDs. After that, we got the seat. I designed the majority of this bike off of a Honda Rebel CMX, the newer ones, as well as kind of like that naked Ducati look to it. I really wanted to see the frame, see the bending and everything, which is kind of like how Ducati looks. I really like the Ducati Monster, which is kind of similar. It's a different frame style, but the idea of seeing the frame, I really like how that looks. So that's kind of the idea I was going for on mine. But the seat costs you about 70 bucks. I got mine on Amazon. Keep in mind, everything will be linked in the description under my Patreon link. Go press on that and you guys can go consider if you guys want to check everything out that I've used with links to everything I've used for these builds. Next, we got handlebars. Handlebars was just on Amazon again. 35 bucks for that. Real easy. I didn't get Pro Taper. I just bought some generic off-brand handlebars from Amazon. After that, we're going to need pod filters because the big old air box that's in the normal R3 motorcycle is just massive and I wasn't about to fit that in there. So we got some pod filters with that, which was $25. You have to get the ones with a 45 degree so they won't hit the tank. And you'll also need the oil spray for your pod filters. I can't remember what it's called, but I got mine from K&N, or the K&N brand off of Amazon. And last but not least, you're going to need a gas tank. I bought a Honda Rebel gas tank off of eBay. Mine was about 150 bucks, but I priced this one 220 because the one I bought had dents, scratches in it, just so I could cut costs, which you can do the same thing. But if you want a decent gas tank, you're gonna have to spend a lot more, upward to $300, $400 for a gas tank. And then after that, you're gonna run into the difficulty of fitting the corresponding fuel pump into a different gas tank than what it's meant for. I did that and it turned out horribly. Used a lot of liquid gasket for so long, and then finally once summer ended and it got cold and everything would shrink, the gasket went to crap and I started leaking gas everywhere, and I'm still in the process of fixing that. I just haven't yet because it's winter and I haven't really wanted to. I've just been working on the other buggy trying to get it finished. Now we got two different totals here. The first total is going to be everything that you need in order to build the bike without making it street legal. And the final cost for that is going to be $1,443 to build a motorcycle completely from scratch, however you want. That's a really good deal if you ask me, compared to buying one. Now, if you want to make it street legal, you do have the title fee, which was $35 for me, I believe is what it was. And then you're also going to need insurance for the road, which I went through Progressive and it was 70 bucks, making that total $1,548 to have a completely street legal motorcycle that's insured, that didn't even exist prior to this. Now, that's a lot better than, in my opinion, I like that a lot better than buying one, because you get the satisfaction of building it, satisfaction of riding something that you made completely from scratch, something that didn't exist a couple months ago. So, yeah. I hope you all enjoyed this video. I hope this was helpful for you guys as well. Now, make sure if you guys are interested, checking out my Patreon in the description. We have a few different perks. If you guys would like to check that out, I'll go into more detail on that page if you guys want to check it out. But make sure you guys hit that like button, subscribe, and follow for more.